Baburam Bhattarai, thank you very much for talking to The Wire. We want to discuss Nepal's recent political developments as well as India-Nepal relations. And I want to start with going back 2 years, September 2015, when the constitution was finalized. You were chairperson of the Constitution Committee that settled the final draft in a way. That should have been a moment of, when the document was finalized, that should have been a moment of great celebration, but we saw very quickly that there were protests, divisiveness, and an entire period of instability also ensued. Looking back with the benefit of hindsight, do you think things ought to have been done differently? What went wrong, and how would you have handled things if you had a second chance?
I fully agree with you. It would have been a moment of great triumph and happiness for me to promulgate the constitution through the Constituent Assembly, because within the Maoist movement I was the one who pushed forward the tactical line of making the constitution through the Constituent Assembly to achieve the objective of republicanism, federalism, secularism and inclusive democracy. But unfortunately, in the first Constituent Assembly we failed to make the constitution. And in the second assembly, the power equation was changed.
Balance of forces
had changed. The old forces were in favor of all this progressive agenda. They were in the two-thirds majority. So I, as a chairman of the Constitutional Committee, I had the privilege of trying to reach out a consensus among top party leaders. But unfortunately, because of the number game, I couldn't succeed to achieve some consensus on all the issues. On certain issues, we reached an agreement. On the major issue of federalism, we couldn't reach an agreement, because federalism was an issue basically raised by the Madhesis and the Janajatis, the two groups who were basically excluded from the state system for about 250 years. So these people wanted real federalism with identity and autonomous states. For this I tried my best, but ultimately I would say I just failed to have a consensus. So on this issue I kept my reservations, and immediately after promulgation of the constitution I resigned from the assembly, and I am championing this cause as well as the other issues, especially the directly elected presidential system. Because I still believe, given the electoral system we have adopted in Nepal, parliamentary system plus the proportional representation system, this hodgepodge won't give any political stability. That's why I wanted a directly elected presidential system. On this issue also I had my reservations.
There are lots of positive aspects in the constitution that was finalized, without a doubt, in many ways a very advanced document. But the question of federalism remains unresolved, even a year and a half later. If I come to the present, the government of Prachanda, your erstwhile comrade, your erstwhile party leader as it were, he is now in power, and he formed the government with the promise of resolving the federalism issue, passing the amendments that the Madhesi people want to be passed. That hasn't happened yet, and now we have local elections announced for the middle of May. Do you think that in the face of the boycott that many of the Tarai political players have said they will enforce, these elections will go ahead, or do you think it's wise to have elections before the amendments, or should some effort be made to pass the amendments first?
In fact, the federal restructuring of the state is one of the more core issues raised during the Maoist insurgency. Within Nepal, there are three major clusters of nationalities. One is the Madhesi Tharus, the other one is the, we call Janajatis, the Tibeto-Burman groups, and the Khasa Arya groups. These three are almost 1/3 in population. But in the power sharing arrangement, the more than 80% of power and position being dominated and exercised by the Khasa Arya groups. That is why the Madhesi, Tharus and the Janajatis want real restructuring of the state, which is justifiable. So Maoist insurgency raised this issue. Later on, the Madhisi movement supplemented it. But it is very unfortunate that Comrade Prachanda, who was my erstwhile comrade, at the last phase of the Constituent Assembly, he virtually changed his stand and sided with the Nepali Congress and the UML. On this issue, I differed with him. I still believe without taking the Madhisi Janjatis and the Tharus on board, which constitute about 2/3 of Nepal's population, we can't have stability and peace in the country. So in that sense, without bringing these people on board by amending the constitution to cater to their demands, I don't think it will be possible to hold the election, and it is not desirable also.
Right. Many Nepali political analysts say that as a result of a backlash to the demands of the Tarai Madhes people, leaders like KP Oli of UML have become very popular, and that in some ways they are pandering to the idea that federalism will weaken Nepal's unity and integrity and is somehow an anti-Nepali demand. How do you how do you see Oli's rise in the political firmament? What do you think are the key sources of his political strength today?
It's a very disturbing phenomenon all over the world. You see, anti-inclusion agenda has been monopolized by certain section of the ruling elite in many of the countries, including the USA, and Mr. KP Oli, under a left banner, is pursuing the most rightist, regressive agenda in Nepal. So he is just pandering to the passion or the so-called insecurity of the ruling elite, who refuse to share power with the excluded sections of Madhisis and Janjatis. He is trying to consolidate the Nepalese elites who feel leaderless after the abolition of the monarchy. So that way temporarily he may gain, but ultimately it will prepare a ground for continued and escalated instability in the country, which will be very harmful and dangerous. So that is why people like KP Oli need to be discouraged and politically confronted.
In a very crowded political landscape in Nepal, you took the bold step of pushing for the creation of a new party, Naya Shakti. You say this represents a new kind of politics, a new kind of initiative in Nepal. What made you choose this path as opposed to fighting for your line within the Maoist party or seeking to influence existing parties? Why did you feel that the creation of a new party was necessary?
There are 2 or 3 things which led me to this conclusion. Firstly, all over the world, the old ideology of the left and right is not working. Both neoliberalism and the state socialism are under tremendous crisis, and there is a search for alternative ideology and political thought all over the world. So in Nepal also, the old binary of left and right is not working. So we want to find a new political thought or the ideology which is suited to the 21st century and the concrete condition in Nepal. This was one of the points I thought important. And the second point was Nepal being a country of diversity, basically divided into 3 major clusters of nationalities. We need to unify all the 3 nationalities to maintain the unity of the country and have peace. For this also the old political parties have virtually degenerated into a chauvinistic group pandering to the passion of the ruling Khasarya groups. And the 2 groups, Madhisis and Janjatis, have been marginalized. So I think I thought I should take, myself coming from the Khasarya background, I should take the initiative to take all the sections together and maintain unity of the country. And thirdly, after the political change in the country, now people are aspiring for economic development. In Nepal's contradiction right now is the advanced form of democratic rights and the retarded or the retarded form of economic development. That is the major contradiction. Until unless we embark on a path of rapid economic development in the country, we cannot fulfill the aspirations of the people. Rampant poverty and unemployment is the biggest problem in the country. So to do away with also the economic development and prosperity agenda needs to be raised and put in the focus by the political party. And fourthly, the politics and politicians have been degenerated into a quagmire of corruption and misgovernance all over the world, particularly in the South Asian region. So Nepal also, in Nepal also corruption and misdeeds are rampant among the political parties. So that is why we wanted to provide a clean government which will fight corruption. So with these points in mind, we floated this Naya Shakti party.
Now though the development of the Maoist movement and the struggle, including the armed struggle, are obviously an integral part of Nepal's recent history, and one could argue that the Constituent Assembly and the Constitution and all the progress that has happened over the last 7 or 8 years wouldn't have happened without that struggle. There are many people who say that they're attracted by Naya Shakti and by your leadership, but they want you to, in some ways, repudiate your past, repudiate people's war. One has even heard some liberals say that Baburam must apologize for people's war. What's your comment or response to these kinds of demands?
Now, see, in the context of Nepal, Maoist movement needs to be judged separately. It was not just a class-based movement. In the concrete condition of Nepal, democratic revolution was not completed even by the end of the 20th century. So to do away with the feudal order led by the monarchy, we had to organize an insurgency, and Maoist tool was found, at least for me, more desirable and useful to do away with the monarchy and complete the democratic revolution. To that extent, Maoist insurgency, as Maoist people saw, was a need of the hour. To fight against an autocratic system, people at times have to take to arms. That has happened elsewhere also, in Nepali history also. Nepali Congress raised arms against the Ranas, and UML raised arms against the Panchayati autocratic system led by the monarchy. So Maoists also had every reason to raise arms against the monarchy. So that is one different phase of the movement. That is now over. So instead of repenting on that or repudiating that, we should preserve the gains of those movements, democratic gains. Because of that we have got this republicanism, federalism, secularism and inclusive democracy. We should move ahead. That is why, but for the new agenda, as I have just told you, of good governance, development and inclusiveness, for this Maoist ideology, I don't think it will be useful anymore.
For the present period.
For the present period. That is why this needs to be developed further. I would say not abandoning it, but developed further to suit the condition of the 21st century and the concrete condition of Nepal.
Right. Turning now to India-Nepal relations, we noticed around the time when the constitution was finalized, fairly negative reaction from the Indian government side. Was this largely driven by the fact that the Madhesi demands for a federal structure that included them fully was not recognized, or do you think India was responding to the enshrining of secularism as a principle in the constitution? Explain to us what your understanding is of the Indian policy in the months after the constitution was adopted in Nepal. Why was there such a negative reaction?
During my current visit to New Delhi, I have tried to make a point strongly with my friends I have met in New Delhi. The times have changed, but the political thinking both in New Delhi and Kathmandu has not changed. This is the time to review the overall gamut of relations between India and Nepal, and to restructure our relationship to suit the demands of the 21st century. So Nepal should know the core aspiration or need of India, and India should also realize the core aspiration of the Nepalese people. So in my understanding, India's core concern is security and strategic issues, and Nepal's core concern is India doesn't fully accept or respect the sovereignty of Nepal and doesn't contribute towards the economic development of the country. So if that is so, which I believe that is true, then both sides should sit down and resolve this issue.
Which is why you have this formula. Recently you said that Nepal should look after India's security interests and India should look after India's economy. I mean, can you, concretely, what does that mean though? For example, the Indians will say that Nepal should be more receptive to hydroelectric projects which can benefit Nepal and benefit India, which Nepal has traditionally resisted. So concretely, what would this formula that you're proposing, how would it operate?
So what point I was trying to make was, because of this trust deficit between the two countries, minor issues like the timing of permanently of the constitution or particular person heading the government in Nepal have been raised by India, and it has been rightly seen as a interference in Nepal's internal affairs. Instead of doing that, New Delhi also should focus on the broader strategic issues, policy issues, rather than the minor micromanagement issues. And in Nepal also should be sensitive to the genuine security and other concern of India. So that's why I suggested India being an aspiring regional power and a future global power would have naturally a certain strategic and security aspirations from Nepal. So Nepal shouldn't hesitate to give a clear-cut commitment on that, because we have to deal more with India. Though we are a sovereign and independent country, we should have good relations with both the neighbors, India and China, but everybody knows we have to deal with India more. So if that is so, without antagonizing China or taking due care of the genuine security interest of China, we should be more sensitive towards the genuine interest of security interest of India. So from Nepal's part, we should be able to do that, and from India's part, Nepal being an independent sovereign country for so long, India should not be seen as hesitating to respect and honor it. They should do it, and then mainly current aspirations of Nepalese are a rapid economic development. For that, India's cooperation in the development of hydropower and other resources and investment needs to be duly taken care of by India.
Right. The allegation that some Nepal political leaders make, pretty much from all the mainstream, UML, Maoists, maybe even Congress, that the Madhesi movement is instigated by the Indian government, that India is trying to use the Madhesi card to weaken Nepal's sovereignty. How much credence would you give to these kinds of accusations, or do you think it's just part of the right-wing nationalist narrative within Nepal?
Because the federalism issue was raised by firstly the Maoists and then the Madhesi political parties, and later on supported by the NC and the UML. So it has occurred from within Nepal. It has been the agenda of the political parties within the country. But when they fail to resolve it, then India was seen as supporting this cause. And so this was used by a section of the political parties in Nepal to brand all these agendas, progressive agendas, as India-driven. So in my opinion, I think this is not true. This agenda of republicanism, federalism, secularism and inclusive democracy are the Nepalese people's agenda raised by the political parties, and India should not be seen as instigating it, and India should not instigate it as well. Because if India's core concern are security and other interests, India should come out frankly with its interest. Instead of doing that, India should not be seen backing one group against the other. So I think that needs to be corrected by India, and from the Nepalese side, our internal issues should not be sidelined and accused as if it was raised by the outside forces. I see this tendency of branding all the progressive agenda as anti-national and foreign inspired is very harmful to the country.
My final question, Mr. Bhattarai. We've seen in the last week the victory of Bharatiya Janata Party in Uttar Pradesh and the election of Yogi Adityanath as the Chief Minister of UP. Obviously, this is an internal matter of Uttar Pradesh and India, but to the extent to which Yogi Adityanath has been quite active in raising certain Nepal issues. He's been a backer of restoration of the monarchy. He's been a backer of the idea that Nepal should be declared a Hindu Rashtra. Do you feel that the influence of Adityanath may be felt across the border in Nepal now that he's Chief Minister?
I don't think it will be proper for me to comment on the internal political electoral issues of India. Even if Chief Minister Adityanath had some thought, otherwise thoughts about Nepal, that won't prevail, because the foreign policy matters, the center takes the lead, takes the decision, and I think the state government will have to follow that. So I don't think it will have any major impact. Personally, people can have different opinions. In democracy that happens, but I don't think that will have any serious fallout or ramification in Nepal.
Right. Thank you very much for this interview. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.